internet. For Veterans Day this November, turns out Call of Duty is giving away a double XP weekend for free, and all I had to do was join the military. If I wanted to waste 4 years of my life getting a career that didn't matter, I would have gone to college. This month on the Suave Zouaves, we're going to be talking about Call of Duty. Call of Duty originally got its start on the PC, but it didn't really gain traction until it was ported to the consoles. The original Xbox and PS2 got the first Call of Duty console game, and then they just kept making sequel after sequel after sequel until nobody cared anymore. Call of Duty Finest Hour, Call of Duty 2, and Call of Duty 3 for the original Xbox, PS2, Xbox 360, and PS3, and also Call of Duty Big Red 1, because there were 2 Call of Duty 2s for some stupid reason. I don't know. But before we can get into all that, we need to get the right fuel. Call of Duty is such a weird series. Never before has a game series had such a vast variety of different identities, but pretty much copy and pasted gameplay. Call of Duty did not perfect the first-person shooter genre, or even the World War II shooters for that matter, but what it did do was add an element of realism to the genre. Now, what Call of Duty had going for it at the time was a change in pace for story than other World War II shooters, giving you, the player, a more realistic take on the shooter craze of the late 90s and early 2000s. GameSpot went so far as to call it an authentic presentation of a World War II battlefield. It was really well received, even getting a 91 on Metacritic. Well, except for the user Chulong Gambo.
Don't buy this game, trust me it's rubbish.
Who gave it a solid 0 out of 100 in 2004. So a game as popular as Call of Duty, it only makes sense to port that bad boy to a console, right? Man, sure is disorienting to see logos like this immediately followed by harrowing footage of World War II. Call of Duty Finest Hour isn't so much a straight port of Call of Duty on PC, but rather a spin-off. It follows a lot of the same convention the game was known for, but providing a more watered-down version. As was the norm for PC games ported to consoles, you always lost a lot of the fidelity that a PC could provide compared to the underperforming brethren that was the PS2 and Xbox. And while the Xbox had a little more power than the PS2, you still couldn't fit the same PC game onto a console without sacrificing something. Call of Duty Finest Hour is padded out to the extreme. The campaign clocks in at about 10 hours, but given that there's only 20 missions, that's like a half an hour or less for each mission, so they ramped up the difficulty like a mother. Enemies take far too many hits to take down, and the hit-scan nature of the weapons makes it feel really floaty when you're aiming down sights, wailing on nothing even when there is clearly enemies in front of you. The difficulty really spikes when you realize just how few checkpoints there are. I think each mission has one, and only one. So when you think you've made some substantial amount of progression in a mission, better hope you don't f***ing die. Your squad mates do practically nothing. The AI is pretty much set to follow you around, occasionally shooting at some stuff. Their deaths are inconsequential, though, as there is no fail state for them getting killed. I understand this is because you're in a game where you want to be the one to kill everything yourself, and incompetent AI squad mates dying all the time would just get in the way, but then why have a squad with names and health bars and all that shit? Couldn't these just be nameless soldiers wandering the battlefield? Do they really have to be characters? But the worst example of the padding is this sniper mission. It requires you to take 9 real minutes to complete. 9 f***ing minutes. Do I really have to shoot these f***ers for 9 whole minutes in what essentially equates to a carnival game? These might as well be wooden ducks instead of German soldiers, and this might as well be on the Wii. We might cover those. Probably not. And when you die or mess up even slightly, it takes you all the way back to the start of that mission. You expect me to get as far along as 8 minutes and 45 seconds, then I f*** it up and I miss a German with a rocket launcher and boom, I have to do the whole thing over again? It's bullshit. You know what I could be doing in 9 minutes? Heating up a couple of Hot Pockets, not playing the shooting gallery. The next missions in Africa are no better. These are the shortest missions in the game as there's the least of them, but in order to compensate, they really ramp it up as every f***ing German in the next 100 miles has access to a heavy machine gun with a tiny reload window. Maybe this is some kind of metaphorical representation. You're in a tight corridor with no cover and everybody and their brother is trying to gun you down and, well, basically, if we didn't make this clear enough, war is hell and there will be very few survivors. I played very little of the Western Front missions with the Americans, as at that point I had had such a distaste in my mouth for the whole game, having played the last couple of missions dozens upon dozens of times. I'll be the first to admit, I'm not a first-person shooter fan, so there might be a few of you in the comments giving me the old get good advice, but listen here, folks, this ain't me and my skills. This is just bad game design. It's hard to make the game feel longer, and I just don't got time for that shit. I give Call of Duty Finest Hour a 4 out of 10. It's an honest effort porting a beloved PC shooter to the console. The controls are at least decent, though on the Xbox to this day I still can't get over the placement of the white and black buttons. And there are some of those real set-piece cinematic moments that do make it for an enjoyable experience. The problem that weighs it down is ultimately the difficulty is through design. The game is too short, so they had to pad it with something in order to make it feel like a big, epic shooter event. And the reality was the only way they could figure out how to do that was make it as hard as humanly possible. Here's hoping they got it right with Call of Duty 2. This is clearly an early 360 title based entirely on its graphics. Like, if you just showed somebody this image right here and said, tell me, what era of video gaming is this from? They would look at it and they go, oh yeah, that's the 360. That's the fucking, look at it, that's the fucking 360. You know what? Yeah, you know what? Yeah, at least you're honest this time. This game immediately feels way more natural to play, and though I'm still never going to give up my mouse and keyboard for a controller, it's still just, it makes sense. There's a good use of checkpoints, and maybe that's because I'm on easy this time, but it feels like every major event in the game has a checkpoint tied to it, so you're never repeating the same things over and over again. Call of Duty 2 has really perfected the aiming down sights, pop and fire cover mechanics that the series is now famous for. Never once do I feel like this is some laborious task where I'm expected to face actual hellfire in order to play my fantasy soldier pew-pew game. There's a nice variety of locale and missions, and while the graphics are definitely not pushing any of the 360's limits, and dem textures are probably 64 by 64, the modern frame rates and engine upgrades since the Xbox titles are a vast, vast improvement as I can see what it is I'm shooting and where. The story is still much a you just so happen to be in the right place at the right time affair, taking place in different areas of World War II without a central protagonist. Right away, you'll notice that there's a lack of a health bar in Call of Duty 2, and it introduces regenerating health to the series, another thing that will become a mainstay for all later COD games. While I know a lot of gamers have gripes with the regenerating health systems, I think it makes the most sense in a Call of Duty. Sure, it doesn't make any fictional in-game sense like it does in Halo, where at least it's explained by Master Chief having a literal shield generator, but for a run-and-gun shooter like this, where the whole point is to move in and out of cover going from set piece to set piece, yeah, it did kind of mess up the flow to have to frantically search around for medkits that enemies dropped when I'm starting to get low on health. Clearly, Call of Duty 2 on the 360 was a very faithful port of the original PC version, given that the 360 and the PS3 had vastly improved technical capacities as consoles were starting to basically become low-end PCs at this point in their life cycles. This game really tightens the experience and makes it feel like it's correct being on a console. Again, while not the most graphically impressive, Call of Duty 2 definitely is a vast improvement over Finest Hour in terms of a console port. I give Call of Duty 2 an 8 out of 10. It's fun, frantic, and if you're into historical settings, there's a great attention to detail in the campaign that really gives you a visceral feeling of mowing down enemy soldiers. A controller will never replace a mouse and keyboard, but given how fun this was to play, I can see why this series started to migrate to exclusivity on consoles. But let's see how the last generation of consoles got to experience Call of Duty 2. Right away, I am completely disoriented. This is very different from Finest Hour in terms of how the game plays, and as far as a spin-off to Call of Duty 2, it's still just, weird. The first thing I notice is that there is no more impact cue to let you know when you've hit an enemy. In Finest Hour, it was a little red crosshair that let you know when you've landed a hit. In Call of Duty 2, it was a little faint blood splatter where your bullet sank. Here, nothing. So now I'm running around with these hit-scanny weapons, knowing jack all if I'm hitting anything, and I'm even worse off than I was in Finest Hour. This is really weird and jarring to play after playing the first 2 games. I hate knowing that I've taken out a guy only by seeing his body ragdoll somewhere off in the distance. Yeah, there is some blood splatter when you're in close range, but there will be times where you're so far away, you just can't see anything. Are you dead? I mean, you fell over. Maybe you're just wounded. I can't tell. This game does something a little different than its predecessor when adapting a major Call of Duty to the consoles. It adds a single protagonist narrative, admittedly still a silent protagonist. You play as the Big Red One, or at least a small squad from the Big Red One, a real-life infantry division who saw a lot of ground combat during World War II. Your squad mates actually have some merit this time around, as they are not only there to provide you with extra firepower taking out enemies, but they also serve a grander purpose in the narrative. Again, nothing really happens when they die. They mostly just take damage like bullet sponges and respawn when the next story mission needs them, but at least there's some narrative stakes here, and the guys themselves are likable enough, even though a little stereotypical. However, the squad also leads to the biggest gripe I have with this game mechanically. You never have to open a door in a Call of Duty game. The game itself boasts in its opening pseudo-tutorial mission. Instead, whenever you breach a door, your squad mates do it for you, and sadly they are still from 2005, so they are very likely to get lost or lag behind you. I'm sitting here patiently waiting to continue the game, but instead I have to wait for my baby ducklings of a team to cross the road. I didn't play Big Red 1, lovingly dubbed Call of Duty 2 Bro, for more than the first hour, but from what I've seen of the story and gameplay, I can see the incentive to want to play further. It's not a bad game by any stretch, and it definitely does a good job of trying to adapt a larger, mainstream Call of Duty onto an older, last-generation console. I give Call of Duty 2 Bro a 6 out of 10. While it fails in some aspects to deliver the same strong sense of gameplay that Call of Duty 2 did, it still provides a decent shooter on the original Xbox if you were that kid who really wanted to play Call of Duty, but your parents didn't want to shell out for the next-gen hardware just yet. Consistency. I like it. So Call of Duty 3 was a launch title on the PS3, and apparently it sucked. At least a lot of user reviews on gaming forums seem to think so. Call of Duty 3 kind of shifted the era where Call of Duty was a PC game first, later ported to consoles, as this is the first and only title to be exclusively on the PS3 and Xbox 360, thus making the series a game they clearly make for consoles and would then port them later to PC. Between the success that was Call of Duty 2 in 2005 and the soon-to-be success of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare in 2007, both released by Infinity Ward, Call of Duty 3 was sort of squeezed into the middle in 2006 by Treyarch. According to an interview with senior producer Noah Heller and creative lead Rich Farley,
Call of Duty 3 was about 8 months end-to-end for development.
With such a little amount of time to develop a game, let alone a numbered installment of the other popular Call of Duty series, a lot of folks consider this to be mostly filler. Many hated the quick time events, moments in the games where you would encounter an enemy in a very scripted way akin to a Mario Party minigame, wiggle some bumpers, tap the X button, then hit triangle to execute. It's admittedly a pretty boring feature that doesn't feel like it really belongs. While the quick time events never really slowed anything down to a terrible degree, it made doing tasks that in a previous game like planting an explosive charge kind of a chore. Some players cited the linear design of the missions, some said the gameplay loop was tired, others felt the story was lackluster and by the numbers. Players felt that it was just more of the same out of the now decade-old World War II genre. To many, this was just the boring title that came between Call of Duty 2 and Call of Duty 4. But I'll tell you what, as someone who has never played the game up until this review, I actually really liked it. Yeah, the major issues that the players took with the game at the time of release are totally there, and at the time you were just sort of getting used to a new Call of Duty game coming out every year. On top of the ever-waning popularity of World War II shooters in the mainstream, I could see how a little bit of fatigue would set in. But for me, playing this game in 2019, I can say with assurance this is actually a really good Call of Duty game. Granted, I have some hindsight. For example, when browsing around in the controls, I immediately saw tilt as an option I could turn off. As someone who isn't playing this on a PS3 for the first time in 2006 at launch, I already know how mediocre 6-axis controls are, so I turned that off right quick.
Some of the game developers are actually finding good ways to make use of some of the new features on this, like the tilt motion with Warhawk. That was very good.
At this point, though, I think you can tell there's only so much I can say about the gameplay, as there's really only so much they can change. Call of Duty 3 is very much a sequel to Call of Duty 2. Its style, execution, control scheme, and overall tone is very reminiscent of what's come before it. But as the last in the trilogy, Call of Duty 3 has honestly perfected the handling of World War II weaponry. The sound design is on point and beefy, every shot feels very tactile and satisfying. Aiming down sights feels the most natural it's felt in the entire series so far. It was gradual, but the game really enforced its mechanics through gameplay as I slowly began to understand that slight tilt down on the right joystick to pull the recoil in and make the perfect shot. For most of these games, I played about 2 hours each, getting as many missions in as I could so I could get a feel of how the game played and its tone. These weren't meant as in-depth reviews, more as snippets and first impressions. Call of Duty 3 was really the only game that drew me in with the fluidity of its levels and pacing to the point where I actually wanted to keep playing until I'd beaten it. There's enough here to keep me playing more. My major gripes with this game were mostly the AI squad mates. Constantly getting in my way and making it difficult to traverse maps when we were in tight corridors did add some unneeded tension. I also don't like the mechanic of how you pick up an enemy grenade involving a 2-button process. Picking them up with the square button, then also having to press the button used for throwing a grenade normally, had me lobbing some of my own grenades into my squad as my brain preemptively saw an icon to throw back the grenade and just skipped forward to the throw button, completely ignoring the square button entirely. And I blew up a few dudes accidentally. I'm sorry. All that in mind, though, Call of Duty 3 is still some really great shooting mechanics for what it's worth. For a game made in 8 months, it really is a testament to Treyarch and their team to create something that even a non-FPS fan such as myself could enjoy. I give Call of Duty 3 an 8 out of 10. I think this game is absolutely on par with Call of Duty 2. If I were to play them both longer and go more in-depth, I might tweak my score a tad, and one of them might come out on top over the other, but as it stands right now, Call of Duty 3 is a solid entry into the series and a great way to end the numbered Call of Duty games. For somebody like me, who's always actually been into history, playing these games just sort of gives you a first-person account of how these wars took place. There are moments that are clearly where liberties have been taken with the actual events, but for the most part, it's accurate historical depiction of what would have been happening in these theaters of war in World War II. So I didn't really get a chance to explore Call of Duty's multiplayer servers because Xbox Live and PS3 servers have been shut down at this time of recording, but from what I've talked to people who played them at the time of their release, most of them were at least pretty good, the consensus being that the Xbox 360 version had a more versatile online functionality, but that's just kind of a general given between the 360 and the PS3. The 360 was just a better console for online, and that's just, we all know that by now. Like, I love the PS3, but it just, yeah, online sucked. Remember, with the holidays coming around this year, it's never too early to start thinking about our subscribe-a-thon. We're trying to get 100,000 subscribers this year. It's a big goal, and I know there's a lot that we need to accomplish here, but if you could put your support towards a channel that doesn't matter, you too could help us reach our goal of that many subscribers. It means a lot to us here at the Suave Zouave, and frankly, you're gonna make a little boy real happy, and that little boy is me. Suave Zouave's 2020. Look forward to it. Subscribe if you feel like it. Share this video if you like. Comment down below about your favorite Call of Duty game, or maybe a game you'd like to see me cover in the future. Meanwhile, I'm gonna be enjoying a nice, refreshing beverage. Everybody have a good night.